After the Avengers battle against Loki and his army, Adrian Toomes and his team are hired by New York City Hall to collect all the debris left in the city. However, during the collection, the Damage Control Department shows up and claims to have been sent by Stark Industries to carry out this work. In a partnership with the federal government, Tony obtained the right to store alien and exotic materials in his laboratories, leaving Toomes and his team unemployed. However, the group didn't leave empty-handed, as they had already collected some alien equipment left on the battlefield. When he saw the materials, Toomes had an idea for making money and, over the next few years, he used all those parts to create and sell extremely powerful weapons. Among his greatest inventions is an extremely advanced technological suit that allows him to become as powerful as a superhero. A few years later, after doing a brief internship with Tony Stark and fighting alongside him in Civil War, Peter Parker returns to his aunt's house and gets on with his life. It's not long before the young man back to his normal routine, but he is anxiously awaiting his next mission. 2 months have passed and Peter has received no more messages from Happy or Iron Man, who is now considered his mentor. Every day after school, Peter puts on his uniform and goes out into the city dressed as Spider-Man to protect the citizens of New York. Even when he can't find any criminals to take to jail, Peter makes an effort to contribute to the population and becomes the city's most popular superhero. One night, Spider-Man sees a gang of criminals trying to steal money from an ATM and doesn't think twice about going after them. While trying to arrest those guys, Peter realizes that they are using a weapon made with alien technology and decides to get it. At that moment, one of the criminals tries to stop the superhero and fires a shot that destroys several surrounding stores. When Peter realizes that the diner across the street has been hit, he rushes to rescue Mr. Delmar and the criminals manage to escape. Frustrated, the young man returns home and climbs through his bedroom window so as not to attract the attention of his Aunt May. What he didn't imagine was that Ned, his best friend from school, would be there waiting for him and is shocked to discover that Peter is Spider-Man. After swearing his friend to secrecy, Peter asks him to leave and says that he will explain everything in detail the next day. During PE class, Ned hears Liz saying that she's in love with Spider-Man and reveals that Peter knows the superhero. He knows that his friend has a crush on that girl, so he decides to give them a chance to get together. However, Flash Thompson doesn't believe this story and challenges Peter to take Spider-Man to Liz's party this weekend, as the two are great friends. In order not to come out as a liar, Peter has no choice but to take Spider-Man to the party. However, just as he's about to enter the girl's house in costume, he spots blue smoke a few kilometers away and decides to investigate. As he approaches the site of the explosion, Peter comes across the alien arms suppliers who sold the pistol to the bank robbers. However, when his location is discovered, he is attacked by the criminals, who flee after shooting Spider-Man. During the escape, Shocker calls his boss and informs him that he is being chased by the superhero. At this point, the pair manage to escape and Peter decides to take a shortcut to be able to catch up with the criminals. However, just as he was about to climb into the van, he is captured by Toomes, who uses his technological suit to take Spider-Man for a ride in the sky. When he finally manages to free himself, the young man falls into a lake and is about to drown when Iron Man appears and manages to rescue him, having fitted a tracker to his uniform. During a conversation, Peter discovers that Stark is not inside the armor. In fact, he's out of the country and controls his suit remotely. The billionaire then orders Spider-Man to stay away from those criminals, as he has already sent a specialized team to capture them. When Iron Man leaves, Peter finds a piece of a gun lying on the ground and realizes that there is an extraterrestrial energy source inside. So he decides to take the object home. Furious, Toomes calls his employees to account, because they shouldn't have started shooting in a public place to attract attention. Upon hearing his boss's sermon, one of the men begins to mock him and ends up being expelled from the team. Before leaving, he threatens to hand the group over to the police, so Toomes decides to eliminate him to ensure that his illegal arms empire is not destroyed. The next day, Peter spots Shocker at his school and asks Ned to hide while he goes to investigate those guys. The truth is that they are using a device to detect the electromagnetic pulse emitted by the energy source that Spider-Man found. As they can't find it, the criminals decide to leave and, on seeing them leave, Peter sends a tracking device to accompany them, so that he can discover the location of the smugglers' hideout. After a long journey, Shocker and his partner stop off in Maryland and Peter decides to go there to investigate them. The city is not far from Washington, so the young man takes advantage of the fact that his school's debate group is traveling there and hitches a ride with them. Along for the ride are Ned, Flash, Liz and MJ, a mysterious girl who refuses to make friends with any of the students at her school, but takes a strange interest in Peter. During the journey, the young man receives a call from Happy, who is contacting him to find out why Spider-Man has left New York. But instead of telling the truth, Peter makes up an excuse and says he's accompanying his school's debating team to a competition. Although he has great respect and admiration for Tony Stark, who has asked Happy to keep an eye on his apprentice, Peter doesn't want to risk being prevented from acting on this mission, as he believes this is the perfect opportunity to show his mentor that he can be a real superhero. So Peter decides to remove the tracker from his uniform and enlists Ned's help to hack his suit in order to unlock all the hidden functions that had previously been blocked. After putting on his uniform, Spider-Man goes to meet Shocker and enlists the help of a virtual assistant to direct him. Finding the villains at an abandoned gas station, Peter tries to hide in the vehicle to follow them, but discovers that his webs are different. There are countless combinations for him to try out, so Spider-Man ends up fumbling as he is unfamiliar with the new configurations of his web slinger. While hiding on a rooftop, Peter spots Toomes approaching the convoy that is on its way to the damage control department. The man then uses a device to break into one of the trucks and steal the alien technology being transported inside. At that moment, Peter appears and manages to recover the stolen items. He then begins a duel against the villain and ends up falling into the back of the truck. Seeing the young man inside, Toomes removes the device that allowed him to enter the vehicle and Spider-Man is trapped. Due to a head injury, Peter passes out and, when he finally manages to get out of the container, he discovers that he is inside one of the most secure buildings in the world, the storage vault of the Department of Damage Control. While waiting for dawn, which is when the safe will be opened again, Spider-Man needs to find something to do, so he decides to have a chat with his new virtual assistant. During the conversation, the young man decides to give her a name and starts calling her Karen. He then takes the opportunity to train his costume's new abilities to ensure that it won't be destroyed the next time he's in a duel. After spending several hours trapped inside that safe, Peter begins to freak out and decides to use his wits to figure out the right combination of numbers to open the door. After leaving the department, he hitches a ride in a truck in order to return to Washington and meet his colleagues before the debate begins. However, Peter doesn't make it in time, but thanks to MJ his team manages to win the student championship. The young man's next mission is to warn Ned that he is carrying an explosive in his backpack. When he was trapped inside the vault, Spider-Man discovered that the lilac stone he gave Ned turns into a bomb when it is exposed to radiation. The young man is climbing the Washington Monument with his classmates when suddenly the Chitauri core explodes, causing serious structural damage to the elevator. To prevent his friends from suffering a fatal fall, Spider-Man must climb the monument and destroy one of the windows to enter the tower. While the superhero is trying to break the glass, a police helicopter appears and the officers order him to get down. Seeing the aircraft approaching, Peter has an idea to break the window and attaches his webs to the helicopter in order to gain enough momentum to enter the building. At that moment, the elevator cables break and the hero uses his web to hold it up. However, the weight of the elevator ends up pulling Spider-Man down and he has to stick his webs to the ceiling to prevent the structure from hitting the ground. When all the students are safe, Spider-Man disappears and that night Peter returns home with his classmates. The next day, when he returns to school, Peter is called into the principal's office and given detention as punishment for not showing up for the debate. Despite not being grounded, MJ also chooses to stay in detention after school and does so only to get closer to Peter. After a few minutes sitting there, the young man gets angry and leaves, because he needs to find the guys who are selling illegal alien weapons. With Karen's help, Spider-Man manages to track down the identity of Aaron Davis, the guy who was trying to do business with Shocker, and decides to go after him to question him. Despite not being able to intimidate Aaron with his approach, Peter manages to get some information out of him and discovers the next location where Shocker will be selling his merchandise. The negotiation will take place inside a ship, so Spider-Man needs to stay outside the vessel so as not to be noticed. During the investigation, he spots Mac Garden, a man with a long criminal record, and decides to act before the criminal takes possession of the weapons. While the young superhero tries to arrest the buyers, Shocker warns his boss about the attack and Toomes doesn't think twice before taking action. He immediately gets up and walks towards Peter. Suddenly, the FBI appears and surprises the young man, who had no idea that they were infiltrating the ship. Suddenly, Toomes appears in his flying suit and Spider-Man has to get the FBI agents out of the villain's way so that they are not eliminated. During a direct duel against the alien weapons supplier, Peter manages to tear a piece out of his suit, which starts shooting everywhere. In an attempt to contain the weapon, Spider-Man covers it with his webbing and ends up causing even more damage, as the rays dissipate and hit the entire structure of the ship, breaking it in half. Immediately, Peter uses his webbing to connect the two parts and prevent them from separating completely. However, the workaround doesn't last long and the webs begin to break. When all seemed lost and Spider-Man no longer knew what to do to save those people, Iron Man appeared and enlisted the help of his jet-powered devices to join the two halves of the ship. At the end of the rescue mission, Stark goes to talk to Peter and lectures him for going behind his back. The truth is that Iron Man was the one who sent the FBI to keep an eye on Toomes and blames Spider-Man for putting those people's lives in danger. After the great disaster caused that day, Stark orders Spider-Man to return his uniform and Peter returns home frustrated, as he is now just a normal high school teenager again. When he arrives at the apartment, the young man discovers that his aunt has been worried all day trying to talk to him and tries to reassure her. When she is informed that Peter has lost his internship at Stark Industries, May feels moved and gives up on scolding him. Until then, the woman doesn't know that her nephew is Spider-Man, but she has already realized that there is something different about him. In the weeks that follow, Peter returns to being the exemplary student he always was. After spending months neglecting his studies, he finds himself in a position where nothing else matters apart from getting good grades. One day, meeting Liz in the corridors, Peter plucks up the courage to declare his feelings and invites her to the school party, which is to take place the following weekend. When the girl accepts the invitation, Peter is overjoyed and asks his aunt to help him choose an outfit for the party. With May's help, he manages to find the perfect suit for the occasion and then goes to meet Liz. When he rings the doorbell, Toomes answers and discovers that he is the girl's father. From that moment on, Peter doesn't know how to react, but he tries to remain calm so as not to arouse suspicion. Terrified, Peter can't take his eyes off the villain and has to hitch a ride with him to the party. Along the way, Toomes takes the opportunity to interrogate his daughter's possible boyfriend and, as the conversation progresses, he begins to suspect him of being Spider-Man. Arriving at the school, the man asks his daughter to go in first while he has a brief chat with Peter. Since Spider-Man saved Liz's life in the elevator, Toomes says he'll give him a chance and orders Peter never to interfere in his business again. If the young man doesn't follow this advice, Toomes says he will eliminate him and his entire family. Not knowing what to say, Peter just gets out of the car and walks into the party, still a little lost by what has just happened. When he finds Liz, he says he has to leave and puts on the uniform he sewed himself to go after Toomes. However, on his way out the door, the young man ends up being attacked by Shocker, who has been left there as a security guard to prevent Spider-Man from going after his boss. After taking several blows, Peter ends up losing his web launcher and is unable to fight back. He is about to be destroyed by the enemy when Ned appears and uses the web launching device to hold off the villain's weapon. Spider-Man then takes the opportunity to disarm Shocker and pin his body to the side of a school bus. Peter then tells Ned that Toomes is Liz's father and asks his friend to contact Happy to let him know. Before going after the man on his way to the airport, he orders Ned to track down his cell phone, which was deliberately left in Toomes' car. In order to reach the villain, Peter has no choice but to steal a car and borrows Flash's convertible to help him on this mission. Despite not knowing how to drive properly, Peter manages to reach his final destination, but ends up having an accident. Luckily, there is no one around to hurt and the young man also manages to get out unharmed. Breaking into the shed, Spider-Man encounters Toomes and discovers that he is moving his office to another city. At that moment, the villain activates the wings of his uniform and decides to use them to destroy the columns that support the place. Seconds later, the roof collapses and Peter is buried under the rubble. After eliminating his adversary, Toomes decides to flee and has no idea that Spider-Man has managed to survive. The young man is trapped under the concrete beams and has to gather his strength to free himself. Even though he's wounded, he doesn't give up on his mission and uses his webbing to cling to Toomes' suit. The villain plans to invade a plane to steal the cargo and changes the coordinates to take all those weapons directly to his team's new hideout. Meanwhile, Spider-Man keeps trying to break into the aircraft and the security alarm alerts Toomes to the young man's presence. Furious, he sets out to attack the superhero and tries at all costs to get rid of him. During the battle, some of the plane's turbines end up being destroyed and the aircraft begins to lose altitude. At that moment, Toomes receives an alert from his team, who order him to get off the plane because the ship is about to crash. However, the man refuses to lose all those goods and tries to stop the crash. When the aircraft is already below the clouds, Peter realizes that it will soon crash into the city's buildings and thousands of New Yorkers will be eliminated in the crash. To prevent this from happening, Spider-Man uses his web to pull on one of the plane's wings and manages to divert its course. This measure does not prevent the collision, but it does reduce the damage caused by the accident and, luckily, no one is hit during the fall. Despite being injured and bewildered, Peter manages to survive and, on getting up, ends up being attacked by Toomes once again. As he is still recovering from the accident, he is unable to defend himself and faints after being hit several times by his enemy. Seeing the cargo compartment intact, Toomes decides to let go of the young man and tries to take the box. At that moment, Peter wakes up and realizes that there's something wrong with the villain's mechanical wings. In an attempt to save him, Spider-Man pulls his opponent back to the ground, but Toomes remains determined to escape and, when he manages to take off, his uniform explodes. Peter quickly runs through the flames in an attempt to save him and manages to pull Toomes' body out from under the rubble, saving his life. Minutes later, Happy and his team show up and find the criminal trapped in a tangle of webs. That night, they finally manage to arrest the man who had been wanted for several months. On Monday, Peter returns to school and sees Liz leaving. The girl has gone there to say goodbye to her friends and collect her things, as she is moving to another city with her mother. Before saying goodbye, Peter apologizes for what happened at the party and manages to make up with the girl. Now that Liz is no longer at school, Professor Harrington needs to select a new leader for the debating team and MJ is the one. During a meeting with the group, Peter receives a message from Happy and goes to the bathroom to find him. At that moment, the man reveals that Stark has asked him to take the young man to the new Avengers headquarters and Peter is impressed by the beauty of the place. A few minutes later, Stark appears and congratulates him on having made amends for his mistakes. The billionaire says he was wrong about Peter and decides to take him back as an apprentice. After giving Spider-Man back his uniform, which is now even more technological, Stark advises him to get dressed, as he has prepared a press conference to introduce him to the world as the new member of the Avengers. Next, Peter will get to know his new lodgings, as from now on he will be living in that tower. Upon hearing this, the young man thanks his mentor for the opportunity, but says that he prefers to continue living in New York with his aunt for the time being, because the city needs a superhero. While Peter waits in the car, Pepper appears and informs him that the reporters are impatiently waiting for the big announcement. At that moment, Stark picks up an engagement ring and takes the opportunity to propose to his girlfriend. When he gets home, Peter finds a present on his bed and learns that Stark has decided to return his old uniform to him. The young man immediately decides to try on the costume and ends up being caught by May, who finds out the hard way that her nephew is Spider-Man. During an expedition in Mexico, Nick Fury and Maria Hill investigate a disaster that has occurred in the city of Extenco, where a battle is taking place between Mysterio and an elemental. Meanwhile, Peter Parker continues to live his quiet life in New York and is preparing for a 2-week trip to Europe with the rest of his class. During the school trip, the young man intends to implement a plan to win over Michelle James, better known as MJ, his classmate. While the young man is packing, his Aunt May tries to persuade him to take his Spider-Man uniform with him to wear in case of an emergency, but Peter decides not to, as he intends to take a vacation from his work as a superhero while he is abroad. After several hours of flying, Peter, Ned and the other students arrive at their first destination. When he goes through immigration, Peter has to open his suitcase for inspection and finds his Spider-Man costume along with a note left by May. Luckily, the inspector doesn't even suspect that the young man might be a superhero and Peter continues his journey without arousing suspicion. The group has just arrived in Venice and has the help of a boat to take them to their hotel. After packing up, Mr. Harrington takes his students for a walk around the city and Peter buys a necklace to give to MJ as a present. The young man is walking peacefully through the streets of Venice when he notices a strange movement in the water and suddenly a giant monster appears from the lake. At the sight of the creature, all the people around immediately run away, but many don't manage to escape in time. When he realizes that the water monster is approaching a bridge full of people, Peter decides to take action and helps evacuate the area, but ends up being attacked. Just then, another superhero appears and uses his superpowers to try to stop the attack. Seeing the wizard in the helmet who resembles Doctor Strange, Peter decides to join him and offers to help him stop the villain. His goal is to get that monster away from the canal, so that the townspeople are out of danger. During the battle, the giant ends up knocking down a church tower and Peter uses his webbing to hold it up. However, all he manages to do is slow down the fall, as the tower is too heavy. Meanwhile, Mysterio gives the water monster a beating and uses his wizard powers to eliminate the creature. From that day on, the superhero became known in the city and received applause from the locals before leaving. That night, on his way back to the hotel, Peter receives a visit from Fury and the agent informs him that, a week ago, a village in Mexico was wiped out by a hurricane. Witnesses say that the cyclone had a face and 3 days later, a similar event took place in Morocco. Fury therefore suspects that some superior intelligence is behind these disasters. While sailing around Venice, he hands Peter a pair of glasses and reveals that the object was left to him by Tony Stark, who recently perished. That night, Fury takes the young man to his hideout, where Maria Hill and Beck, the real name of the superhero who saved Italy hours ago, are. The man claims to belong to a parallel reality on Earth and explains that the elementals, who have been attacking different countries in recent days, were born inside black holes and were formed by the 4 primary elements: air, water, earth and fire. According to Mysterio, these same creatures attacked his world years ago and, with each battle, they grew stronger. Thanks to Beck, 3 of these monsters have been destroyed in the last week and only one remains to be fought. The superhero tells them that the fire elemental is the strongest of them all and was responsible for destroying his planet. Satellites indicate that this monster will appear in the city of Prague in approximately 48 hours and the group's mission is to eliminate it. To do this, Fury asks Peter to help him, but the young man refuses to accompany them and instead decides to continue the journey with his gang. However, the next morning, instead of taking the class to Paris, as planned in the itinerary, Mr. Harrington reveals that the travel agency has changed the route to Prague, where the students will spend the next 2 days. Immediately, Peter realizes that Agent Fury was responsible for this change, but he has no choice but to get on the tour bus with his colleagues. During the trip, the young man decides to try out the glasses he got from his late mentor, and Edith, an augmented reality defense and security system created by Tony Stark, presents itself. At this point, Edith reveals that she has control of the entire global security network created by Stark Industries, including defense satellites and access to all the major telecommunications networks. After a few hours on the road, the group of students makes a bathroom stop and Peter meets an agent who works with Nick Fury. To prevent Spider-Man from being seen in Europe, the woman gives Peter a new uniform and the young man returns to the bus with his colleagues. That night, he meets with the rest of the team and says that he will stay in the cathedral tower waiting for the elemental to arrive. Then, when the fire monster appears, Peter will inform Mysterio and the two will team up to destroy the enemy. Peter's biggest worry is that his friends are in danger because of him. After all, if it weren't for him, his gang would be in Paris, far away from the attack that will soon take place. In an attempt to reassure the young man, Mysterio says that all Peter needs to do is convince his colleagues to stay indoors for a few hours and assures them that they'll be fine. With Edith's help, Peter gets some tickets for an opera concert and in this way manages to ensure that his gang is protected in a safe place during the battle. Before Spider-Man leaves for his mission, MJ invites him to sit next to her and Peter is tempted to abandon the battle to spend time with the girl. Once again, however, his plans are interrupted by Fury who, through a communicator, says that he will be waiting for the young man at the agreed location. Seeing Peter sneaking out of the building, MJ decides to go after him and is followed by her friend Betty. Knowing about the battle that will take place over the next few hours, Ned decides to follow the girls to ensure their safety. Coincidentally, there's a huge party going on in the city on this day and the streets are jammed with people. Suddenly, the fire elemental appears and starts destroying the city while Betty and Ned are trapped at the top of a Ferris wheel. Seeing the monster at work, Mysterio and Spider-Man team up to try to stop it, but the creature is capable of absorbing all kinds of material, so no attack is strong enough to defeat it. With a single blow, the elemental causes a crack in the ground and the Ferris wheel begins to topple. Immediately, Peter goes to the aid of his classmates and Beck claims to have a plan to stop the enemy. After saying goodbye to the young man, Mysterio gathers a large amount of energy and pierces the elemental's body, agreeing to sacrifice himself to destroy it. Luckily, Beck manages to survive the explosion and Fury invites him to join him as a member of Europol's headquarters in Berlin. That evening, after the great success of his mission, Beck invites Peter to dinner at a restaurant and the two of them talk about the technological glasses that the young man got from his mentor. Determined to get on with his life as a normal young man, without the responsibility of having to save the world at any moment, Peter decides to hand over control of Edith to Beck, as he believes the superhero will make better use of the technology. After getting rid of the pressure to become the next Tony Stark, the young man feels relieved and says goodbye to Beck to go and find MJ. Then, when the young man leaves, Beck deactivates the holographic system he has implanted in the restaurant and celebrates the fact that his whole plan has turned out as he had hoped. The truth is that Beck and the team of scientists who work for him are former employees of Tony Stark and the only thing all those people have in common is that they hate their boss, each of them for a specific reason. The group of supervillains pooled their knowledge to fool Fury and pretend that the elemental attacks were happening in random places on the planet, when in reality they were all orchestrated by Beck. The man has managed to fool everyone by pretending to have superpowers when, in fact, all he has are drones and high-tech equipment that produce perfect holograms, making him capable of fooling billions of people with illusionism alone. When Peter returns to the hotel and finds Ned, he learns that the school trip has come to an end. After the 2 consecutive attacks that the students suffered, their parents contacted Mr. Harrington and asked for the immediate return of the teenagers to the United States. Knowing that this is his last chance to meet MJ in Europe, Peter decides to ask her out on a date and, during the walk, he discovers that his Spider-Man identity has been discovered. MJ has had her eye on Peter for some time and reveals that she saw him fight the fire elemental that night. At that moment, the young woman shows the device she found at the scene of the battle and suddenly the image projector is activated. After analyzing the machine, Peter soon comes to the conclusion that the elementals were fake and discovers that Mysterio was really responsible for causing all that destruction. When he realizes the mistake he made in passing Tony Stark's glasses onto a supervillain, Peter decides to confess that he is in fact Spider-Man and returns to the hotel with MJ. Meanwhile, Beck is at his headquarters rehearsing the choreography for his next drone attack. This time, however, the man plans to eliminate an even greater number of victims, because he knows that the greater the disaster, the more his name will be acclaimed when he defeats the creatures that caused this catastrophe. At this point, Beck realizes that there is something wrong with his suit and William reveals that the projector of one of his drones was lost during the battle. In an attempt to find the evidence that could ruin his entire plan, the man accesses the drone footage and discovers that the projector was found by MJ. Thanks to her, Peter Parker now knows that he has been tricked and Beck comes to the conclusion that he will have to eliminate him to ensure that his secret is not discovered. Without even imagining that he has become Mysterio's target, Peter plans to go to Berlin to reveal the truth to Fury, as he suspects that Beck has tapped his cell phone. While the young man is putting on his superhero costume, Ned appears and tries to throw MJ off, but the girl reveals that she has discovered that Peter is Spider-Man. After telling his friend that Mysterio is a fake who created the elementals through holographic projectors, Peter asks Ned to call his Aunt May and ask her to contact Professor Harrington to let him know that the young man will be visiting his family in Berlin. The next morning, Peter finally arrives in Germany and is met by Fury, who takes him to his office. When he gets there, the young man explains in detail everything he discovered the night before and soon realizes that he has been caught in a trap. The place where Peter was taken is also just an illusion created by Beck, who reveals that he is disappointed to have been betrayed by the young man, as he believed that Spider-Man was his friend. When he sees Mysterio's holograms approaching, Peter tries to attack him, but Beck manages to disorient his opponent and Spider-Man takes quite a beating until he ends up falling off the building. At this point, he manages to return to reality, but is soon pursued by the drones and once again becomes the target of Mysterio's attacks, who uses Peter's worst fears and pains to haunt him. Unable to distinguish between what is true and what has been created by the illusionist, Spider-Man is unable to defend himself and the best he can do to try and get out of the trap alive is to dodge any attack that is heading his way. His nightmare only comes to an end when Fury appears with his team and shoots Beck. The agent then walks up to the young man and asks who knows the truth about Mysterio. After getting his answer, Beck reveals himself and Peter realizes that he has been tricked once again. Because of him, his friends have become the villain's new targets and are in danger of being eliminated at any moment. Now that he has all the information he needs, the man manages to get rid of Spider-Man and has the hero run over by a train. What he doesn't realize is that the young man managed to survive and blacked out as soon as he got on the train. When he wakes up, Peter discovers that he has been taken to a Dutch municipal containment unit. Frightened, he gets up and breaks the lock to get out of his cell. Minutes later, he meets a local resident and borrows a phone to contact Happy, who accesses the young man's location and sends a jet to pick him up. Relieved to see a friendly face after all he's been through, Peter tries to think of a way to make amends for his mistakes, but despairs when he realizes that his friends are in danger because of him. Realizing that the young man is completely shaken, Happy tries to reassure him and says that he will help Peter put things right. After checking the social networks of one of his classmates, Peter discovers that they are in London and asks Happy to take him there while he assembles a new Spider-Man costume with the technological equipment that Ship has. Meanwhile, Maria Hill reveals that she has just detected a large electromagnetic pulse coming from London and Fury asks for Mysterio's help to investigate what could be emitting that signal. Now that he is in control of Edith, Beck has an unlimited supply of drones and requests a large number of them to create a monstrous storm that covers a large part of the city. The villain's plan includes getting rid of Peter's friends during the attack, but Mr. Harrington manages to guide the students off the bus before the vehicle is struck by lightning. While much of the city is destroyed, a mist monster appears on the bridge and Mysterio's hologram approaches to confront it. Knowing that the aberration is just a projected image, Peter hitches a ride on Happy's jet and flies over the creature. That way, his image isn't captured by the cameras. While talking to Beck through a communication device, Fury realizes that he is being tricked and prepares to interfere in the battle. However, when he sees Peter approaching the monster, the agent feels more confident, as he believes that the young man is capable of defeating it. Falling inside the monster's body, Spider-Man finds the drones that are forming the image of the creature that, according to Beck, was created from the fusion of all the elementals. After uniting all those machines through his web, Peter uses an electric shock to short-circuit the projectors and the illusion begins to unravel. The young man then goes after his target, but is shot down by one of the drones and Beck orders Edith to send all the drones to eliminate Spider-Man. At that moment, Happy lands his ship in the middle of the city and sets off to find Ned and MJ, because he needs to get them away from Mysterio. But when he finds them, the man sees his jet destroyed in an explosion and has to change his plans. After sending a legion of drones to eliminate Spider-Man, Beck goes after the teenagers who are with Happy and chases them until they reach a museum. Through a camera built into the drone, the man can follow his target's every move and the group needs a plan to distract him. At that moment, Betty drops a suit of armor to get the machine's attention and then MJ attacks it with a medieval weapon. While the drone shoots wildly all over the place, the group runs to the vault and hides there, as the walls are extremely thick and able to protect them from any attack. However, this strategy isn't enough for Beck to give up on eliminating his victims and, while one of his drones tries to destroy the vault door, the villain continues his hunt for Spider-Man. Surprisingly, Peter manages to dodge all the attacks, even though he is the target of countless drones, and isn't hit by a single shot. However, when he reaches the bridge, the superhero is surprised by bursts of sound that push him and all the vehicles nearby into the lake. After getting out of the water, Peter goes after a shield, which he uses to protect himself from the gunfire, while throwing a bomb to destroy the drones. His main goal is to capture Beck, because he knows that only then will he be able to stop the attacks and prevent more people from being hurt. However, when he is found by Spider-Man, the villain orders Edith to attack him and Peter has to fight him to get his glasses back. Once again, the young man is trapped inside an illusion created by Mysterio and relies on the help of his spider sense to cross the corridor formed by the drones without being hit. After destroying a percentage of the drones, he manages to interrupt the scenario created by the holograms and Beck ends up being accidentally hit by one of their weapons. In his last moments, the man repents of all the evil he has caused and returns the glasses to Peter. However, this scene is also just an illusion, because his true self would never give in so easily. Since he's injured, this was his last attempt to turn the game in his favor, but when Peter takes Edith back, Mysterio realizes he has no chance. After putting on the glasses, Peter sends all the drones back into space and, before he can be confronted, Beck perishes from a gunshot wound. When he realizes that the drones have been deactivated, Happy opens the vault door and MJ runs through the streets looking for Spider-Man. After finding him, the girl hugs him and Peter is relieved to know that all his colleagues are alive. Just then, MJ reveals that Happy has given her a necklace and Peter is frustrated that he didn't get the chance to deliver it in person. Thrilled, the girl decides to kiss him and reveals that she had her eye on Peter long before she suspected he might be Spider-Man. After revealing her feelings to her classmate, the girl goes to find the rest of the class and Peter goes the other way. The next day, he and MJ start dating and return hand in hand to the United States. When she meets her nephew again, May is extremely happy to hear that he is well and takes Peter back home. When he gets there, the young man discovers that Happy and his aunt are dating and sets off across the city in his Spider-Man costume to find MJ. In the end, things turned out much better than he could have imagined before the trip, because as well as saving the planet once again, Peter is now dating the girl of his dreams. Before being defeated by Peter Parker in Spider-Man Far From Home, Mysterio reveals the superhero's true identity, causing real chaos in his life. Michelle Jones, his girlfriend, was walking through the streets of New York when the news broke and a crowd of reporters approached to interview her. Just then, Spider-Man appears and saves the girl from that situation. After being seen all over the city, with the help of his synthetic web, he takes his girlfriend safely home. The couple enters through the bedroom window, and shortly after, May and Happy open the door. The man tells them that they broke up, and while Happy was suffering in the corners, Peter reveals to his aunt what the whole world now knows, that he is Spider-Man. At that moment, several helicopters approached the building and his face was all over the news. The population was outraged because they believed Mysterio was a good superhero, and yet Spider-Man had eliminated him. Now Peter was being investigated and a warrant was issued for his arrest. To make matters worse, May, MJ and Ned, his best friend, were charged as accomplices and had to answer at large. Matt Murdock, his lawyer, reveals that the police do not have enough evidence to pursue charges. However, the boy will still have to face public opinion, which was not at all in his favor. While they are talking, someone throws a brick through the window and Matt manages to hold it back. Peter is impressed with his lawyer's skills and soon notices the note that was on the brick, which declared support for Mysterio. Apparently, it would be impossible to convince people that this man, in fact, was a great villain. After this attack, Peter and May realize that they need to move to a safe place and decide to move in with Happy until things settle down. The next day, Peter and MJ prepare to face the first day of their senior year in high school. A crowd gathers around the school. Some went to the school to declare their support for Spider-Man and others were there to intimidate him. When he finally manages to get into the building, the boy is frustrated to realize that his classmates and professors have also started treating him like a celebrity. At this moment he realizes that he will never again be treated as an ordinary guy. Later, Peter and MJ meet on the terrace, that seemed to be the only place where they could be alone without being filmed. While they were talking, Ned shows up and the trio starts talking about their college plans. Everyone planned to study at MIT, but MJ was afraid. The girl prefers not to put too many expectations on it, so as not to get frustrated. During the week, some letters arrived from other Boston universities, to which Peter had sent his resume. However, the boy was not accepted in any of them. Still, he tried to remain optimistic that he would be accepted in his first choice. A few days later, the long-awaited letter from MIT arrives and Peter goes to the coffee shop where MJ works so that they could open it together. Ned was also there and all three read the letter at the same time. At this point, they find out that they were not accepted because of their involvement with Spider-Man. Unhappy that his friends have been harmed because of him, Peter decides to go after the only person who can help him. That afternoon, he goes to visit Dr. Stephen Vincent Strange. When he enters the mansion, he finds the place covered with snow, and soon after, Wong appears to welcome him. While they were talking, Strange appears and asks why the boy went there. Peter asks if the sorcerer could go back in time and stop Mysterio from revealing his identity. But Strange reminds him that they, along with the Avengers, have messed with the stability of space-time to resurrect millions of lives and asks if Peter really wants to do it again just because his life has gotten complicated. However, the boy replies by saying that the reason he is asking the sorcerer for help is not because his life has been turned upside down, but because the people he loves are also being affected because of it. Strange states that even if he wanted to help, he could not, because he no longer possesses the time jewel. However, the man proposes another solution, a forgetting spell. This spell would make people forget that Peter is Spider-Man. Wong warns that this spell is very dangerous, but nevertheless, Strange decides to help the boy. They head for a cave, which was hidden inside the mansion, and the sorcerer begins to prepare the spell. Strange reveals that once the spell is finished, absolutely everyone will forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, including him. Upon hearing this, Peter asks MJ, Ned and Aunt May to stay out of this spell. Due to this interference, Strange loses control of the spell, nearly causing a catastrophe on the planet. After finding out that the spell didn't work and getting kicked out of the mansion, Peter goes after the Vice-Chancellor of MIT, who is on her way to the airport, to try to get a second chance for his friends. When the boy finally manages to find her, his spider sense informs him that something wrong is about to happen. Suddenly, dozens of people abandon their cars and start running through the streets. Metal tentacles appear under the asphalt and destroy the vehicles. Soon after, Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, appears and hurls several cars in Peter's direction. The man catches the boy and throws him away. Peter unleashes his metal legs to fight this new villain. Although he didn't know who this guy was, Octavius seemed to know him very well and, for some reason, wanted to get revenge on the boy. While trying to dodge his enemy's attacks, Peter must save the Vice-Chancellor, who was about to have her car overturned on the train tracks. However, before the boy could get the woman out of the vehicle, Octavius captures Peter and rips off part of his uniform. Since the uniform was composed of nanotechnology, the material bonds with the Doctor's tentacles and allows Peter to take control. As Octavius tears off Spider-Man's mask, he realizes that this is not the Peter Parker he was looking for. The boy uses one of the man's tentacles to get the Vice-Chancellor's car back on the road. The woman thanks him and says she will ask the committee to re-evaluate Peter and his friend's admission to MIT. Now that he has managed to capture Octavius, taking control of his tentacles, Peter tries to find out who that guy is and why he is trying to kill him. Just then, the Green Goblin appears and tries to attack him. However, the boy is saved by Strange, who uses a portal to take him and Octavius to his cave. There, the villains are being held in a special prison. The Doctor explains that the spell that Peter modified has begun to pull into that reality people from all universes who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Strange asks the boy to capture the villains and take them to prison while he thinks of a way to send each of them to their own dimension. To do this, the sorcerer hands Peter a bracelet. The boy should use it to shoot a laser at everyone who does not belong to that universe. This would send them directly to prison. Peter promises that he will accomplish this mission, however, he will need the help of his friends, MJ and Ned, to locate the villains. While scouring the internet, Ned finds reports of witnesses who claim to have seen a monster flying around a military research facility near the city. Peter suspects that this monster is the same guy he saw on the bridge before he was teleported, but Octavius claims it is impossible. He says that man is Norman Osborn, better known as the Green Goblin. However, according to Dr. Octopus, Norman had already died several years ago. It is evening by the time Spider-Man arrives at the facility. As he walks through the surrounding forest, the boy senses someone's presence, but apparently he was alone. Peter continues walking carefully until he spots a luminous creature that was absorbing all the energy from the light poles. Spider-Man uses his bracelet to shoot that monster and send him to Strange's special prison. But the lightning goes through his body, as if he is not made of matter, only energy. Now the monster decides to strike back and shoot several bolts of lightning at Peter. He tries to dodge it, but ends up being hit and his body is thrown far away. When the creature launches its final attack, a terrifying sand mountain appears and forms a barrier to protect it. While blocking the attack, the man introduces himself as Flint Marko and asks if Peter doesn't remember him. The boy then enlists Flint's help in capturing Electro. The Sandman forms a tornado around the villain, and Peter uses his web to break the power cables and stop the creature from charging. In this way, Electro is weakened and manages to recover his human body. Spider-Man explains that they were sent to another universe and Max tells him that he really felt that the energy of that place was different. But Peter interrupts the conversation and sends Max to prison. Flint becomes suspicious, believing that the man had been killed. He then tries to attack Peter, however, the boy manages to send him into the dungeon as well. While in prison, Max meets Dr. Kurt Connors. The giant reptile was actually a brilliant scientist who deliberately transformed his own body into a lizard in order to obtain the same regenerative ability as the animal. The next morning, Peter receives a call from his Aunt May, who informs him that one of the guys he has been looking for has shown up at his work. The boy goes there immediately and is completely scared. His biggest fear is that someone he loves will be hurt by one of those monsters. When he reaches the kitchen, he is surprised to find May and Norman sitting down, chatting amiably. Still suspicious, the boy listens to the man's plea for help. He says he didn't know where else to go because there was someone living in his house, his company, Oscorp, doesn't exist in that world, and neither does his son. Norman also tells that he has a split personality, and when the Green Goblin takes over his body, he cannot control his own actions. Seeing the man's physical and mental state, May asks her nephew to help him. Peter says that this is not his problem, but the woman says that it is the boy's responsibility to help people. However, Peter still believes that the best he can do for those guys is to send them back to where they came from. May then decides to take them to Strange's mansion. Upon entering the dungeon, Norman is surprised to find his old acquaintance, Octavius. At this point, Dr. Octopus asks what happened to Norman, since he was already dead. Flint interrupts the conversation by saying that Octavius should also be dead, since both were eliminated by Spider-Man. Just then, Strange appears and arrests Norman. He brings with him a machine that can reverse his spell and send each of those guys to their proper universe. Upon hearing this, the villains become desperate, for they knew that if they returned to the universe from which they came they would end up dying. Peter tries to convince the sorcerer not to send them back yet. But Strange states that that was their destiny and interfering with it could bring harm to the multiverse. The sorcerer begins to reverse the spell, but Peter steals the box with his web and sends Strange into the prison. However, he manages to get out of there easily and goes after Spider-Man. He politely asks the boy to return the box, but he refuses and tries to run away. At this point, Strange realizes that he will have to take the object by force. After separating Peter's soul from his physical form, the sorcerer tries to take the box, but still the boy was able to move and prevent the sorcerer from taking the object from his hands. Seconds later, he manages to return to his body and escape, so Strange sends his flying cape to capture him and send him to the mirror dimension, where he has full control. After spending some time trying to convince the sorcerer to help him find a way to change the fate of those guys, Peter realizes that he will not be able to change his mind. With the help of his cape, Strange finally manages to retrieve his box and plans to leave Parker trapped in that dimension until he finishes reversing the spell. However, before the sorcerer can return to the real world, Peter realizes that the mirrored dimension is based on Archimedes' spiral and uses his powerful knowledge of geometry to take the box back and trap Strange inside his own dimension. Before leaving, the boy steals the sling ring, a ring that allows the sorcerer to create portals to travel long distances. When he returns to the dungeon, Peter reveals his plan to use his technology to change the fate of those guys before sending them back. Norman offers to help him with this, after all, he is also a scientist. Kurt, the lizard, warns Peter that doing so will have consequences, so the boy gives them two choices. They could either join him to try to prevent their deaths before being sent back to their universe or stay there in the dungeon waiting for Strange to return to reverse the spell. Having the choice of life possibility or certain death before them, the villains accept Peter's proposal. Before he goes, the boy hands MJ the box and gives Ned the ring. His plan was that if something went wrong, he would call the girl and she would push the button, sending all those guys back to their universes. MJ accepts responsibility, but states that if she loses contact with Peter and doesn't hear back, she would push the button as well. After the meeting, Peter and the villains go to Happy's house, along with May. The boy shows those guys a device called the Fabricator, capable of analyzing, designing, and building just about anything. While Peter and Norman try to find a solution, Max looks at the city and thinks of the endless possibilities he could live in that energy-filled world. After a few hours working on the first cure, the pair of scientists manage to finalize the device that would fix Octavius. Peter attaches the device to the back of the man's head and he passes out. When he wakes up, he is no longer that spiteful being and regains control of his tentacles. From now on, he would no longer have to worry about being killed by Spider-Man, as he no longer intended to fight him. After thanking Peter, he offers to help him create the other devices. The next mission was to build a device capable of extinguishing Norman's dark side. Meanwhile, Peter works on a device to block Max's powers and turn him back into an ordinary human. When the light on the device turned green, this would mean that the electricity in his body had been dissipated and he would be cured. Outside, a journalist who was stalking Spider-Man finds his location and lies in wait to get footage that will incriminate the superhero. Suddenly, the spider sense is activated and Peter realizes that something wrong is about to happen. At that instant, he casts his web and traps Norman's hands. The Green Goblin had taken over his body, and May rushes to get the device that can cure him. Peter tries to convince him to continue with the plan, but when he realizes that he won't be able to stop it, he asks his aunt to run away. Max decides to team up with the Goblin and rips off his device before the healing was completed. He then destroys the Fabricator and steals his power core. Since Octavius was still at Peter's side, Max attacks him and the reporters manage to capture the footage. While Peter is fighting the Green Goblin, helicopters approach the building and May escapes down the stairs. When the boy manages to escape out of the building, the lizard appears and throws him back into the Goblin's arms. With the force of its blows, the floor is destroyed and they fall right in front of May. The woman injects the liquid they made, in an attempt to eliminate the Green Goblin and make it so that only Norman has control of that body, but the cure didn't work. Peter asks his aunt to run away, but the woman cannot leave him alone to die. So she takes an object to attack the man. However, at that moment, the Green Goblin's board invades the building and knocks May down. Before fleeing, the Goblin drops several bombs inside and outside the building to frame Spider-Man. Minutes later, May gets up and hugs Peter. The boy is relieved to realize that his aunt is alive. He apologizes for letting it happen, but the woman claims that Peter made the right decision in trying to help them rather than simply allowing them to die. Peter says that this was not his responsibility, but May strikes back saying that the boy has a gift, a great power, and with great power comes great responsibility. As they prepare to leave, the woman falls to the ground and, although she says she is fine, Peter notices a serious wound on her abdomen. He starts screaming for help, but it is too late. Seconds later, his aunt dies. The boy tries to wake her up, but is unsuccessful. Happy arrives and, from inside the car, the man realizes what has happened. The policemen order him to get out of the vehicle, at which point Happy asks Peter to run away. They start shooting and Peter is shot. With no other option, the boy decides to run away. At Ned's house, the boy and MJ try to communicate with Peter, but the boy does not answer the phone. MJ is about to press the button and send the villains back to their worlds. However, Ned notices something different. He discovers that the ring Peter had stolen from Strange and given to him was able to show where the boy was and open a portal there. Ned then waves his hands as he says that he wishes to speak with Peter Parker. At that moment, the portal opens and they can see him in his Spider-Man costume. They call Peter and ask him to go through the portal, but when the boy removes his mask, the two friends realize that this is Peter Parker from another universe and decide to call him Peter number 2. So Ned opens a new portal in an attempt to find the other Peter Parker, and his mission is successful. A second Peter Parker appears, only he belongs to a third universe, so he has become Peter number 3. After entering the house, Peter number 3 reveals that since he arrived on that world the day before, he has been trying to find the Spider-Man from that universe because he feels he needs his help. The problem is that MJ and Ned had no idea where the boy was, so the two new Peters ask if there is any place the boy usually goes to cool off. MJ has a hunch, and so they manage to find Peter. Ned and the girl hug their friend and MJ introduces him to the Spider-Men from other universes. When they meet, Peter is determined to send them all back home, but changes his mind when he finds out that the other two Peters have been through the same thing he has. They both witnessed the death of someone they loved, so they decide to team up to find a cure for all the villains before sending them back. After finishing the medicines, the trio of superheroes devise a plan to lure all the guys to one place and cure them all at once. Then, all they have to do is press the button and send everyone home. Peter number 1 then goes to the Statue of Liberty and makes a live broadcast that is being transmitted on TV. That way, the villains would know where to find him. Max, or rather Electro, is the first to arrive. He is there to destroy the box and prevent Peter from sending him back to his world. However, the Spider-Men manage to lose him and Peter number 1 delivers the box to MJ through a portal made by Ned. The problem is that now the boy doesn't know how to close it. Shortly after, the Lizard and the Sandman appear and a real battle ensues. Each of the villains has his own reasons for wanting that box, and they go all out on the superheroes. At this point, they realize that they will have a better chance of success if all three attack a single target. So they choose the Sandman to be the first to receive the cure. Peter number 3 is responsible for attracting Flint's attention. When he is about to be swallowed by quicksand, Peter number 1 throws him the device they built, which releases a light capable of making Flint human again. The next challenge is to defeat Electro. The villain was extremely strong, as he was using the reactor he stole from Happy's house as a source to recharge his energy. Even though the three superheroes united against him, it seemed impossible to defeat him. To make matters worse, the giant lizard realizes that the box that would take him back home is with MJ and runs towards the portal. The reptile manages to cross him and Peter number 1 goes after him to prevent the animal from hurting his friends. Meanwhile, MJ and Ned run to the statue. They take the drug made to reverse Dr. Kurt's transformation and throw it to number 1. By breaking the bottle, a green smoke is released and Kurt returns to his human form. Peters 2 and 3 were one step away from being destroyed by Electro, but Dr. Octopus arrives to help them. With his tentacles, he rips the reactor out of Max's chest and injects the substance that can cure him. Ned tries again to open a portal so they could escape with the box, but this time Strange uses the portal to exit the mirror dimension and retrieves the box. The sorcerer is furious looking for Peter, but Ned informs him that the boy's plan is working. He, with the help of his friends, had managed to cure almost all the villains. Except the Green Goblin, who soon shows up to break up the party. He steals Strange's box and tries to escape, but when the sorcerer manages to retrieve it, he discovers that the goblin has planted a bomb inside. With the impact of the explosion, MJ is knocked off the statue and Peter number 1 jumps in to save her, but is stopped by the goblin. However, before the young woman reaches the ground and suffers an immediate death, Peter number 2 manages to save her. With the girl in his arms, the boy is moved to remember that he was not able to do the same for Gwen, his girlfriend. With the explosion, Strange's spell that was trapped in the box dissipated, causing absolutely everyone in every universe who knows Spider-Man's true identity to be sent to that reality. Peter number 1 and the Goblin face each other in a final duel. The boy directs all his hatred toward him and confesses that he plans to kill him. Peters 2 and 3 watch from afar and realize that if it continued that way, Peter number 1 would be corrupted by anger and go from superhero to killer. After receiving dozens of punches, the man falls to the ground as he no longer has the strength to fight. At that moment, Peter grabs his board and uses it to deliver the fatal blow. However, Peter number 3 shows up and tries to stop him. As the boy holds the board, he is stabbed in the back. Even though Peter has every reason to kill the goblin, he does not do so. Instead, he decides to heal him and then goes to check on his friend's condition. Seeing that Peter number 3 is fine, Peter number 1 goes to meet Strange to try to help him. The sorcerer informs him that all the universes were collapsing because of him. So, the boy asks Strange to make the whole world forget who Peter Parker is. This means that not even the people who loved him would have memories of him. It would be as if Peter never existed. Still, he decides to accept this burden to save the universe. But before the spell is cast, the sorcerer gives him a few minutes to say goodbye. Peter number 1 runs to say goodbye to his new friends and thanks them for their help. He then goes after Ned and MJ. When he finds them, the boy tells them about the new spell and informs them that the entire universe will forget about him. However, Peter promises that he will go after Ned and MJ and make them remember everything they have been through together. The couple kiss goodbye and the spell begins. All the intruders are sent back to their worlds and Peter leaves before falling into oblivion. A few weeks later, the boy walks through the snow-covered streets while rehearsing what he will say to MJ the moment he meets her. He walks into the coffee shop where the girl works and orders a coffee. His friend, Ned, is also there and Peter finds out that both he and MJ have been accepted on MIT. Seeing their happiness and knowing that the lives of the people the boy loves most were going well without him, Peter decides not to intrude and leaves without telling the truth. Later, he goes to visit his aunt's grave and meets Happy. The man is happy to meet him. Peter then rents a small apartment in New York and tries to get on with his life, never forgetting his Aunt May's words. Although no one else knows him, he knows he has great powers, and great powers come with great responsibilities. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.